Welcome to the second session on progress and experiences in the global north. Our panel of speakers today represent countries and institutions who are central to shaping the discourse on just transition today. Our first speaker is Mr. Bartosz Przyzywara. Mr. Bartosz serves as the Energy, Climate Action and Environment Counselor at the European Union delegation to India since 2023, a long-term diplomat with a rich experience of working on climate and environment issues. We welcome him today, please. Next, we'd like to welcome Ms. Laura Aylett. Ms. Laura is the Head of Climate and Energy at the British High Commission in India. She has worked on international climate change in the UK government for 10 years, specializing in capacity building programs. She was also part of UK's UNFCCC negotiations team at COP22 in Marrakesh. Welcome, Laura. We'd like to welcome Mr. Uwe Gellin, Head of German Development Cooperation in India and Minister at the German Embassy in New Delhi. He has served in Egypt and Afghanistan. He has also been a part of the management of institutions such as BMZ, GIZ, World Bank, and the German Parliament Administration. Welcome, Mr. Uwe. Our fourth speaker to join us is Mr. Wade Buchanan. Joins us virtually today from Colorado, USA. Mr. Wade is the director of the Colorado Office of Just Transition, the first state-level office in USA dedicated to helping coal communities and workers transition to prosperous futures. It is nearly midnight in Colorado, and Mr. Wade's presence today is testimony to his commitment to a just transition. Welcome, Mr. Wade. And finally, I'd like to introduce the moderator for this session, Mr. Amitabh Sinha, Deputy Editor at the Indian Express. He has been specializing in climate change developments since 2008. He has tracked UNFCCC deliberations closely, and his expertise lies in climate communications. Welcome, Amitabh, and over to you.
Thank you. Thanks. I set for you. So we will begin immediately. It's a very important conversation that we are having. Right, so we have four very good speakers, very relevant, and as you would have noticed, this day-long conversation has been structured very neatly. This one is all about how just transition is happening in the developed world, and then the next session we would be talking about how developing countries are doing it, where the just transition would take a little bit more time, and here they have a little more opportunity to learn from what is happening in the developed countries already. So we'll begin with, Mr. Przyzywara, slightly difficult name to pronounce. So pardon me if I get it wrong. So, we'll begin with you first. The EU has a 2050 net zero target. The energy transition has to be completed before that or around that time. If you could just give us a sense about, how do you view just transition? How do you even define just transition? How are you going about it? What is the sort of financial commitment that you have made? And what are the sectors that are involved in transition in the European Union?
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here with you and to discuss this very important topic. Well, in Europe we have been doing it for quite a long time. In India we know that the discussion is there, and we are very eager and very happy to discuss it with you, to help you, to give you our best examples. But let me just maybe start from my own personal story. So I was born and I was raised in the South Pole. I'm from Poland, so I was born in the city of Katowice in the region of Silesia. And in fact, the Katowice and Silesia, it's a big agglomeration of 14 cities making up together 3 million inhabitants. I know it sounds like a joke here, but in Poland it's basically more than 10% of our population, and Poland is not the smallest country of the European Union. So yeah, so it's something. Yeah. And so when I was a kid, the region was the major raw material and major industrial hub in Poland. It was still the end of communist era. There were several coal mines, there was heavy industry, there were metallurgical plants, processing plants, so typical industrial city, industrial region. It was in fact considered an economic hub of the country, so it was pretty rich and pretty successful, but at the same time it was very famous for its incredible pollution. It was famous for catastrophic health statistics, and it was just simply incredibly ugly. And I remember this horrible pollution. There were many people had some lung diseases. I was not allowed to drink water from the tap, and the only river, the small river that was in the middle of the city, was stinking like really hundreds of meters away. Yeah? But okay, then the communism ended, the capitalism came, Poland slowly started this transition towards the market economy. And finally, after some 15 years, it joined the European Union in 2004. And then the process of transition basically accelerated. So the coal mines slowly, gradually started closing down. The factories, the heavy industry, did the same. They basically became less and less competitive on the international market, inside the European as well. So even if Poland was still using the coal, it started basically buying it from abroad. So there was no way that you could continue with this system. And efforts were made to strengthen. Well, basically, there was quite a big investment in education, in transport, in infrastructure, in services, and after that, also the people started coming. The new generation, young people who really wanted to have perspective, who wanted to have a better life in a developed region. So slowly, it became really a prosperous region in the new style. Yeah, and there was at the beginning it was fine. All of it was of course financed from the public money, from the local public money. But then the two new financial flows started. So first one was the private investment. So basically the investors, the companies both from Poland and from abroad started. They realized that it's a prospective region. It's a good idea to invest there because there will be more people, there will be technologies, there will be development. So yeah, the companies started investing, and then when we joined the European Union, also the European Union regional funds started flowing in. And at the beginning, it was just the typical regional funds, which aimed at level of the structural and income differences between the new and the old member states. But then, a couple of years later, basically we in Europe, the leaders of the European Union realized that our development has been so far completely unsustainable, that really we need to rethink and to reorder our relation with the planet and with the nature. And the EU started financing what we call today the just transition. And so now I'm coming to your question. What is just transition? So just transition, as we understand it in the European Union, is basically the process of transition from carbon-intensive to carbon-free economy, but the transition the process that does not leave anybody behind. So it really takes care of everybody, including people, including companies, industries, and the regions themselves. So the European Union embarked in this massive policy and legislative process, which we call the European Green Deal, which has changed over the last couple of years practically everything. It started with energy transition, then it moved into industry, and now we are slowly taking also into the most. I didn't know that it's for me. Okay. I'm not going to go for long. So now we are embarking into those most difficult areas, which are transport, construction, agriculture, and so on. And also with the circular economy, with what we are doing is we are also trying to change people's behavior, people's customs, people's everyday life, so that they basically consume in a way that doesn't produce so much waste, or the waste is being reused. But okay, in order to facilitate this just transition, what we have is the just transition mechanism, as you mentioned. It's a big thing in Europe over the last couple of years, because it aims at 3 levels of beneficiaries. So exactly as I said, it helps individuals, citizens, their families. It helps sectors and companies, and the member states and the regions. And this mechanism represents our logic or our belief that, of course, it's better to give a person a fishing rod than just to offer him a fish. So that's why, rather than providing the short-term help or respite, like, let's say, humanitarian help, we really aim at investing in alternative activities, in gaining new skills, new abilities, and creating and finding jobs in the prospective, future-oriented sectors. Yeah, and of course, this costs money, definitely. So this is where we come to the problematic issue. But of course, there will be never enough money to fulfill all those processes. But in the European Union, we have quite intricate, quite a big mechanism. This just finance mechanism, in fact, is composed of 3 main pillars. So the first pillar is the Just Transition Fund, which comes from the EU budget. This amounts to almost 20 billion euros. But it is expected to mobilize around additional 7 billion of national co-funding. So in total, it's 27 billion euros. Then we have the second pillar, which is the Invest EU scheme, which is basically a budgetary guarantee for projects which are located in those just transition territories or regions. And those guarantees are expected to mobilize additional 10 to 15 billion, mostly in private sector investments. And they are also connected with so-called advisory hub, which provides those investors with certain technical advice, support, how to do, what to do, where to do, and so on. And the third pillar is the public sector loan facility, which combines 1.3 billion of grants, again from the EU budget, with 6 to 8 billion of loans from the European Investment Bank. And they together are expected to mobilize 15 billion of euros of public investment. And this is exclusively targets the public entities, and it gives support to projects that would be really difficult to find the profitable market investment. So as you see, we have 3 different sectors, 3 different pillars, coming both from EU budget, from national budget, but also from the investment banks, and also trying to, and quite successfully trying to mobilize the private investment. And it goes both for the private investment and for the public sector, where it's really difficult to find truly bankable projects.
Yeah. Total financial implication of somewhere around 50 to 60 billion.
Yes, it's I would say it's well above 50 billion euros. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is where it stands. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hylett, so UK recently closed its last coal-fired power plant, but still most of your energy still comes from fossil fuels. So how is UK looking at energy transition? What is the pathway that UK is looking at now?
Yes, so we also have a 2050 net zero target, and that is sort of implemented through our carbon budgeting and climate change act system. So we were the first country to bring in a legally binding emissions reduction target through our climate change act in 2008. And that act requires every part of the government to have a plan to decarbonise their sector. And that gets updated regularly as part of the framework. So that's really helpful to keep our eyes on the prize as we go through this unprecedented transition in every sector. I mean, you're right, the coal closure last month was a really important milestone, and we're doing pretty well, pretty advanced on the electricity sector. So our electricity grid, our electricity production is about 60% non-fossil now, and 35% is natural gas, a little tiny bit of oil. So we're more advanced there. And we've made a lot of progress in the last 10 years because 10 years ago, coal made up 30% of our electricity production. So that's really, really reduced quickly. And if you're taking a historical perspective, we were the first country to have a coal power station in the late 19th century, designed by Thomas Edison in London. And then we've been the first country to turn off our coal, first major economy to turn off our coal. So that is a big milestone. And if you think about the London of the imagination in something like a Scooby-Doo cartoon, it's always really foggy, but it isn't really fog, that was smog. So in the 40s and 50s, we had a lot of pollution, and when coal was 90% of our electricity, and that has reduced. And yeah, in the last 10 years, really, we've been able to phase that out through scaling up low carbon solutions. So significant amounts of solar and wind, and we're continuing to push to triple our solar output over the next few years, and not only increase our offshore wind. We're very lucky to have a lot of coastline in the UK to have this, but also after 9 years, we're expecting to have more onshore wind as well. So that's sort of the electricity sector, but that's only part of the energy story, of course. So in the transport sector, we have a fossil fuel car phase out, with the last being sold by 2035. We'll phase out sales of new petrol and diesel cars. And then in what I think is probably the trickiest sector, in heating of homes, because we have much more of a cooling problem than in the UK, in India, but we have a heating problem. It gets cold, and we have 70% of households in the UK have their own gas boiler in their house linked up to a gas grid, and we need to remove those or change that system. And it's going to be a complicated thing to do. I think a bit of a mixed picture technology-wise, where heat pumps fueled by low-carbon electricity will be part of it. We'll have heat networks, which is where you directly pump into people's houses hot water for the heating, produced from things like waste energy from industry, and then you have, or like big boilers from biomass or other low carbon sources. So it's a real mixed picture depending on the situation, I suppose. And it's really important that all of this transition is just. So one of the ways we've done that really successfully is through the Green Jobs Task Force, which was a government-led initiative, but bringing together academia and industry together so that we could look at what are the job needs of the future, what are the jobs that are affected by this transition negatively, how can we make sure that we're training people in the right skills, and sort of bringing that, integrating that into our education system. So that's been a really successful way of mitigating some of those impacts. And when we're talking about heating in people's homes, we've got to give support to the poorest households, so they can get grants for improving insulation. Anyone can get a grant to install some of those technologies like heat pumps. So we've got to make it affordable for the poorest as well.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen, I'll come to you. Germany has this Ruhr region, which is often very, compared to our coal-bearing areas. We in India always used to compare Ruhr to our coal-bearing areas. That's a good example of where just transition has to be, effected. What are the steps Germany is taking to do this? And again, the financial implications of the just transition there.
2 points. Number one, Bartosz stole my story because, and I don't have to repeat it, because the circumstances he grown up, I had the same situation in Germany, because I grown up rightly at the border of the Rhine-Ruhr region you mentioned. And the one thing I learned in my childhood, and then this gets to my second point, exposed to these living conditions, the positive one is when you look at me, I'm looking like a really strong guy. One of the reasons why I'm so strong is because I carried up, I counted it later on, 14 tons of coal up to my third floor, the apartment, because my parents treated me the ones who had to carry the coal every day upwards to heat the apartment. A crabby apartment, because it had windows only with one glass, and when it's freezing and cold in Germany, you could imagine how this happens. it never really fully heated up, and it never really worked because it's not isolated. So I had ice shelves on my glass window. That's the way how I grown up in my youth. And the one thing beside of not be able to attend school in Cologne in wintertime from one or the other day because the smog was so strong that we were not allowed to leave the house. It's reality. In the 70s, it's reality. You couldn't imagine today. This is reality. I was absolutely clear about that I would never like to raise my kids under the circumstances, to be very blunt on that. So we're all talking about the cost implication and I grabbed the cost. Because a non-financial means of this one, and I went to Odisha and Jharkhand, this is unacceptable. Putting people in this situation, if you have an alternative. That's the thing, is if you have an alternative. And I think it's political responsibility to steer for the alternative and getting away from the whole discussion, which is really not severe and realize for these people who are living in these communities, to be very honest. And I'm not blaming India. I'm blaming general global society. And this is not a North-South issue, honestly spoken. It's a global issue. It became a global issue because we became aware that the impact of this thing is going cross borders. But it doesn't make it more important there. But it makes that in a field of shared responsibility on addressing this in a proper way. So, and now you ask me how Germany does. I'm not going to bother you with this one. Why should you bother you? Because the measures we took up are measures of the past. Why should India go copy and paste measures we invented in the 80s and the 90s, honestly spoken? The technical solutions you mentioned, you know, this is in an environment which is heating the biggest issue. In India, heating is not the big issue. Be very blunt, cooling is the big issue. Cooling is the really big issue. And the transition process to that one, just really affecting the people in a proper way and make them livable and raising their life expectancy and have a higher quality of life. This is what India needs to approach, and not Germany or Great Britain or Poland or the European Union. The question is, how did we start this travel and how did we get there? And this is a very important issue because it needs a certain dimension of not only political will, it needs a social contract and the disseminatory system which allows this steering. To be very blunt and the broad standing, I don't know how far you informed how the European Union, how we call it today, just was founded and raised up. Have you ever heard about the EGKS? No? It's the European Community on Coal and Steel. This is the founding mechanism of the European integration. This is where everything started. And when you look on where this started, actually, it didn't include Poland at this time because it has historical reasons because they had water. It would otherwise, under other circumstances, it would be part of that. And it was the European Union was mainly the coal belt, or the European integration community was mainly the coal belt. It's like you look in India, you have a coal belt as well. And the question was, why was it founded? Was it founded because the idea of just transition? No. It was about controlling coal and steel as war-related important industries. And out of this, we built up the whole concept, the concept of shared responsibility, shared resources, and shared steering on a slightly average living condition within the environment. That's where we started. The financial mechanisms to redistribute were established in this starting phase. And then they became bigger and bigger and bigger, and they were able to include other ones and integrate them partly by that. The idea of structural adaptation in an overall flooding, just for easing the life conditions in the same manner constructed in this political environment. This is the idea of European integration, and this really leads into an option to steer it in something which is more sustainable. UK is now out of that. I'm very sorry about that. I'm really, really very sorry about it, really. But this we keep keeping on with going, and we have a very, very good experiences with that. So the cost issue, it's very interesting. The formulation of cost instead of investment is something which already triggers a certain kind of logical avoidance. You would never do this with something uprising new industries. You would go for car industries and so on. You would not come up with the cost issue with the transformation of the car industry only comes when you try to get from the combustion machines, which is standard, to the electrified one. But the guys who are doing the electrified, they always come with the investment, with the perspective. So just transition is something which is embedded in cultural development and social development per se. Transition happens anyway. question is, how is political responsibility picking up on that and steering them in the right direction? And this is, the people who would like to keep old structure. It's because they would kept their old business model, which is working in a proper way for them, but only for them. When you look about the whole thing about reform process, then you look on the other's perspective. And this is where is something in for me? Where do I lead the investment through? And this is what we are trying to do. So coming in a nutshell shortly, what is Germany doing on that? It's a difficult way, no doubt about it, but we get forward with that. We are not there to close the last coal plant, and I would love to be there, but we are not there. But this is not reason to criticize how we do, because we are on track, honestly spoken. It's a challenge. If we wouldn't put it in a targeting environment where it's a challenge, we would not go forward, honestly spoken. Then we would get and stay in our comfort zone. You have to put pressure on the system. So we're doing that. And it's running slightly well. And I'm happy that it's running slightly well. We're not overdoing it, honestly, because it's an adaptive process, which also has to take the people with us. What are we doing for the world? In the one somehow, we produce knowledge, we disseminate knowledge, and we connect knowledge. This is one of the things we should do with German Development Corporation. And we do it with GIZ, as some of you know as well. So this is not about bringing German experience to other countries. And I not start with North-South. It's about looking globally where is the right knowledge for a certain specific problem and interconnect these dots. Because we are a global community in knowledge. There are no borders in knowledge. And the other thing is we provide certain financial means. But these means are not meant to get forward, to finance it. It's to ease the financing per se. When we started up with just JET-P proposal for India, India refused this JET-P proposal. And one of the strong arguments were, honestly spoken, was, we don't need your money. And I was very, I was not surprised at all. I was very, humble and polite. I said, I'm very happy for that. But the next thing was, we need to have more understanding about your technical solutions. We would love to have this dialogue with you. And we stay ready exactly with this dialogue. We are now working on the question of coal miner closure. And the interesting thing, it becomes very easily an ideological discussion. What is there an ideological discussion necessary on a coal miner which is obviously not anymore working productive, and to close it down in a proper way with an impact positively on the surrounding communities and the upcoming use for that in a constructive manner in a concept of sustainable energy production? What ideology hinders that? That's so stupid. And this is something where we have to be more clear, getting away from this, pillar thinking, this north, south, whatever in a global challenge. It's who could provide what. And I'm always, somehow fuzzy and puzzled what India can do on that. This is unbelievable. This country has so many opportunities and so many knowledge and so much leverage on what it's doing. So for me, it's a development anchor, the hub where the change happens. We already went there. We know already how to proceed. We have already the plans made up. India is in the creation of that one, and it can make the difference with a global range. And I'm really happy to be part of this discussion, because this is where you really make the biggest bang out of the buck. So, and this is, learning from the Germans partially nice, but not too much.
Thank you. Some very interesting points. So it's time to bring in Mr. Buchanan, who is online from. I hope you can hear me properly.
I can, yes.
Okay, wonderful. So Colorado, I believe, has a law passed on just transition, isn't it? So if you could tell us why the law was thought to be a necessary instrument, how effective has it been, and whether that is the way to go for other countries, regions as well.
Yes, well, thank you for letting me join you this morning. I'm sorry I can't be with you. I can say this morning now, it's 15 minutes past midnight here. So I've joined you on the 15th of October. Just a quick background before we dive into it. Our law establishes our office. It doesn't give us a great deal of authority to pull levers to make things happen. It gives us persuasive power. It gives us some money to work with the communities in transition. We have 8 coal-fired power plants that will be ceasing production by the end of this decade. So we will be joining the UK as a coal-free electricity zone, I guess you'd say, by the end of this decade. And our mission is, we don't have anything to do with that decision. What we have to do with is how does the economy help the communities? How does it deal with this disruptive transition? And it is, in that sense, our work is not how do we replace megawatts with megawatts, dirty megawatts with clean megawatts, however you want to talk about it. It's how do you replace good jobs with good jobs, and how do you replace the economic driver in communities with other economic drivers? We have communities that are dependent on coal and the power plants for up to 50% of their tax base. Some of the jobs, a high percentage of the really good jobs in the communities. One of the things I suspect that defines this industry in the global north is that these energy jobs are amongst the highest paying jobs, amongst the highly unionized jobs in our countries, certainly in my part of the world. And so these are highly desirable jobs, and when they're lost, it's not just an impact to the workers themselves, it's a huge impact to the communities as well. So our job is to try to work with the communities on how they replace and make their communities more economically diverse, and how the workers and their families transition to new positions. And that, frankly, is less of an energy question and more of an economic and rural development question for us. And so a lot of the work that we do is and of course, energy is a part of it. Skill sets are here, transmission lines are here. The transition is a huge part of I don't mean to pretend that transition to clean energy isn't happening and isn't incredibly important to our administration. The Governor Jared Polis's administration here in Colorado, we have a 100% goal for a clean energy grid by 2040 and a net zero greenhouse gas goal by 2050, and in compliance with the global strategies. In keeping with the previous gentleman's conversation, I'm not sure how much lesson there is here from our specific experience, other than to say, getting tied up with thinking that the energy to energy transition is going to provide the specific solution for the communities that are going to be disrupted. I think that provides, certainly for us, it provides a very limiting lens to the question of how do we help the communities and how do we help these workers in their own personal and regional transitions get to a place of continued prosperity. So I guess my part of my answer to the question of, what is the role, but how does our law work? It's to come in and to recognize that what we're dealing with is not just a very specific energy transition. We're dealing with an economic transition that is very disruptive. And the question that we have to answer is how does this affect individuals, individual families, individual communities, and how can we work with them to build not just a future that is about clean energy, but it is about diverse a diverse economic future and a resilient economic future, whether that is an energy-based future or something else.
Right, thank you. As you very rightly pointed out, it's not just one sector, it's almost the entire economy that is affected because of the energy problem. Mr. Praiswara, if I could move to you once again. Europe, EU also has this territorial just transition plans. Have you faced similar kind of challenges that Mr. Buchanan was talking about? What what has the experience been so far in implementing that?
Okay, thank you. No, it's true, of course. As every other country or union or a bigger territory, the EU is composed, of course, of very different regions. So they have different geographical location, they have different economic and social structure, different level of income, and that's why since the beginning of the European integration, the regions were given very important responsibility. So it's not only about member states, but also about regions. Well, basically like here in India. Yeah? So the regions are playing really a crucial role, especially in the allocative and redistributive policies of the European Union. But in fact, we have even a special director general, quite powerful and quite. They have a lot of money. Director general for regional policy inside the European Commission. So in order to ensure that this money, these funds from Just Transition Mechanism go to those who are really in need and those who can deliver the fastest and the largest progress in terms of decarbonization on green transition, the EU legislation determines or defines certain criteria that should be met for a given region to benefit from this help. So broadly speaking, the regions have to prove their dependence on fossil fuels or the participation or again dependence of greenhouse gas emission and intensive industrial activities. And the regions have to justify that they are the most negatively affected by this transition, not most negatively affected both economically and socially. So this is what we have discussed. In particular, they have to prove that there are expected job losses, and that there will be, or they are planning to have this transformation of the production processes of industrial facilities. So again, something that costs money, but also things that cost social and economic and environmental, let's say, risks. Over the last couple of years, there was this process of preparation, exactly those territorial just transition plans. In fact, the member states have identified 93 territories and 67 territorial just transition plans have been prepared. Those plans, they have to set up the strategies for each region. They have to define what are the development needs, what are the objectives to be met by 2030, because that's the deadline for this process. They have to explain the let's say intervention logic of this just transition mechanism, why they need this help, this support. They also need to describe the potential projects that would be implemented there, and of course, this process has to be in line with all the other parallel processes, other strategic documents, such as the national climate and energy plans, or the commitments for 2030 and 2050 climate targets, which are in fact imposed by the European Union climate law. The timeline for ceasing or significantly scaling down certain activities, the timeline for transforming the processes, the output. So basically, the whole process. Those plans have been submitted to the European Union through the member states, regions, member states, and the European Union by the end of 2022. They have been all approved. So we can consider them the process as successful at this very beginning of the process, and currently they are in the process of beginning of the implementation. So the regions have now opened the calls for proposals for tenders. The beneficiaries have come up with some specific projects and ideas. And well, basically, we are still at the beginning of the process. So unfortunately, I cannot say whether it's successful or not. But so far, as we have looked, as our colleagues in Brussels have looked into these plans, it seems like a concise, altogether seems like concise strategy, which is in line with our overall strategy to really constrain the emissions and to get to net zero by 2050. So.
Thank you.
This is where we stand. Thank you.
Ms. Eilert, the previous UK government had set up something called Shared Prosperity Fund for transitioning, making the energy transitions. With the change of government, do you think the commitment is going to continue? And what has happened to that in the intervening months?
Well, I think the new government, one of their big priorities is something called Great British Energy, this new energy company that's been set up, a publicly owned energy company that's going to be providing loans and attracting investment for community energy projects, because it's really important that when you have this transition, that the communities that are affected are part of the decision making and benefit from it. So this will I think £1 billion is going into this to provide support for community energy projects where people will be able to look at what's needed, own that, reap the rewards for it over many years, and also link up to the jobs and skills that are needed, and sort of so that communities really benefit from that. So that's one of the big new priorities of the new government. Just getting going now.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Carlin, Germany and some other countries as well, you have been using gas as a in-between sort of fuel while you're transitioning to more cleaner fuels. And there has been some criticism of calling, gas as a green fuel. How important is it for you, for Germany, to use gas in between your transitions? Could it have been done without gas? How important is that intermediate step?
It's funny because if you would ask me the same question exactly before Russia started the war against the Ukraine, the answer would probably different than today. And I was thinking, when I listened to the other ones, I can be very, I can sit here very satisfied and quiet and said, okay, when you look at Germany, we are on the way on this just energy transition in regard of stepping out of coal, which is a very long process, and it's going slightly successful, but we're counting in 2030 up to that one. But what Germany did, actually in the last 2 years, it was a full-fledged just energy transition, mainly out of gas. It only took us 2 years. Gas is still important in somehow, and when you look on the numbers, it's still related in the kind of, this is one thing which triggers very much the discussion on energy security dimension and the question of the industry supply on that. But to be very precise on that, nobody in this discussion's ever speaking up on energy efficiency. It's very interesting that we always skip this subject like it's not existing. And it's the most important one of everything, because energy you don't use, you don't have to produce. It's as easy as it is. Germany has proven in the direct impact of the war and the outburst on the price level, but also in the potential insecurity of energy supply and the potential impact on the German industry in only 1 year, so in only one winter. I think we went down in energy consumption about 20%. And when you look on that, what does it mean? What exactly are these 20%? Did we have a lower degree of life comfort? Did we have a lower production rate? No. The answer is very simple. Obviously, this 20% were wasted before. They were wasted think about the price impact of that one when you look around the line. So we went to this transition. Interesting why the numbers in Germany not rising up in the question of energy use, it slightly goes down when you look on the households, because we also made a shift in the use of solar energy. And the circumstances are not as good as they are in India, honestly spoken. So it's much more expensive for us, and the efficiency is much less. Wind is interesting for us, but wind is a very seasonal thing in our region. But when you look on the numbers now and the comparison how much renewable energies are used up and down, it's really going this way. And this wave thing is not as strong as it would be for India. For India, it would be more constant in the way of supply and the storage for the afternoon and night. But for us, it's more, it has a very much stronger up and down, and we have to bolster that one. And that is where, fossil fuel comes in now, because nuclear is not an option for us. But the question is then, when you look on the price development on storage, it's really getting in our direction. So it would be interesting, again, to have the same question 5 years from now, because the cost of storage goes down, so the polstering becomes easier. So we all in a dynamic. We always have to have in mind, we in a very fast dynamic. It's a little bit like, the invention of the mobile phone. It's in the early beginning, it took quite a while how it picked up. Today, look at you all over this room. You have mobile phones in the hand, but it's not anymore mobile phones. It consists everything. It's your access to the world, which didn't exist beforehand. It changed every pattern. And just to one last comment on how things are accelerating coming out. Whoever watched in the last 2 days news didn't get out the whole thing that obviously Elon Musk achieved the goal in the final extent to have a rocket landing on the spot, Starship Enterprise is not anymore science fiction. It becomes reality. And it doesn't mean it's the same thing, but what we always forgot about is to trust in the potential of the future. We always stuck in the now, and this is all what triggers our opinion about what is possible. And all the cost discussions, to come back then, they are based on the actual assumption. They never have in mind what happens going forward. They never have that encountered in a proper way, because we can't do it, honestly spoken. But then we are risk averse, and then we're stuck with the old, and this is against transition. So no, we're getting less dependent on gas, and that has reasons, honestly spoken, and very severe reasons. We have to get out of that. That's no doubt about it.
Yes. Mr. Buchanan, are you there? I hope. Yes. In the previous round, I did ask all of our panelists about the financial implications of the just transition plans that are being executed in their regions. I forgot to ask you about that. So if you could tell us if Colorado also is looking, what is the sort of financial implications for just transition plans? Also, what is this sort of financial models that you have been implementing? And if there are other challenges, if finance is the biggest challenge, and what are the other challenges that you're looking at?
Yes, great questions. Well, first of all, I want to identify very much with the comments about energy efficiency and the dynamic nature of this conversation. Ask us to, not 5 years from now, 5 weeks from now, and we may have greatly changed perspectives on things. What's interesting is the diversity of, I want to talk about two things. One is the diversity of potential funding. And I think this may be unique to us, but I will say that some of the biggest sources of funding, in fact, for us, potentially the biggest source of funding, are the actual utilities themselves. And again, this may be very unique. I'm not sure how the regulatory structure works in other countries around the electric utilities themselves, but here in the U.S. and in particular in Colorado, through our regulatory process, we're able to engage with the utilities that run the power plants, and in those planning processes that go through our utilities commissions, we've been able to secure, and I say we, I mean, we've participated in this, and we've actually funded some of our small communities that are impacted to participate in these processes. we've been able to secure well over $300 million in commitments from the utilities themselves to help in community assistance strategies for these communities. And that's a, you know, that's a significant number. That's 10 times the amount that the state government itself has been able to commit to the just transition process, the economic development and worker transition piece of this. I'm not talking about the energy transition piece of this, if that distinction is clear to folks. So that's one very important part of it, and for us, that is a funding source that may be underappreciated and underutilized, and frankly, given some of the, we don't have enough money in our office to do everything that we're being asked to do. And given some, again, unique constitutional restrictions on how our state does budgeting and revenue collection, which would take a whole day-long seminar to understand in and of itself, we may not have those resources. So our best opportunity may in fact be the private and nonprofit sector utilities. And then the second part of the question is, and perhaps much more interesting, is the challenge of the political and cultural fault lines that I'm sure most folks participating in this dialogue are aware of in our country, playing out in our politics right now, are very much at play in the communities that we work with. And so we have, you know, the rural, urban, the conservative, liberal, you know, all those tensions and frankly, levels of denial, lack of trust, the central government that we represent versus the localized impacts of the transitions that people are aware of in many instances still don't kind of buy into the reality of the concept of climate change. These are still real challenges for us in trying to work with the local communities on cooperative strategies for the transition. Those remain very real challenges to a cooperative approach for a just transition. And we feel as though we've done a good job demonstrating that we're there for a good purpose and that we mean what we say and that we deliver when we say we're going to deliver something. But that just takes a lot of work and a lot of time. And we can't just show up and say, okay, here's how it's going to be. It just doesn't work in our system. And so it's a long slog, and that is a major, major challenge at least in our neck of the woods.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan. So now that brings us to our last segment of this conversation, which is open to the audience. We'll have a few questions from the audience. This is a very informed audience. The usual SOPs would apply. Please identify yourself. Please mention who the question is directed to, and please be very brief. In the interest of time, we'll just collect 3 or 4 questions and then try to answer them together. Yeah,
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you very much for this really interesting conversation. My question is directed to Uwe. Always great to see you. Uwe, last year with the German Chancellor's visit in February, he outlined the vision of India-Germany partnership and India-Europe partnership in an expanded form for development in the global south. I'm aware India and Germany are working towards its JETP partnership, but what 1.5 years down the line, how does this look like? And what is the same conversation on agenda when the Chancellor visits later this month? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Indrajit. I work with Third World Network. I'm here. My question is to each of the panelists, actually. So how do each one of you define just in the North-South context? This will obviously have a bearing on the implementation of the outcomes of the global stocktake. Also, to point out that while pressure is being stepped up on developing countries to phase out coal, even though developed countries continue to use it, and thanks to CB for pointing out that this will take time as well as huge financial resources. US and UK are among the major countries accounting for a majority of planned fossil fuel, oil and gas fields expansion through 2050. So how do you explain this dichotomy? And finally, why is each of the developed countries on the panel in the UNFCCC restricting the scope of the Just Transition Work Program discussion to being just to workforce and just transition in the national context rather than in the multilateral context? Thank you.
Right, thank you. Yeah, please.
My apologies. I'm Thiru Srinivasan from the Tamil Nadu Electric Vehicle Task Force. One of the challenges we face is how do we bring the MSME sector and the individuals who are impacted by the transition as we move from the IC engine to the electric and also renewable energy. So if you can, each one of you can share one or two ideas on how you did that in your countries, bring these people across the
Thank
transition.
you. So we begin. The first question, I think, was directed only to you.
Yeah, very fast. The story stays. So Olaf Scholz came to India, and yeah, it has different dimensions when he's talking to India. The one is, the bilateral relations we have and we're sharing, and this is really strongly embedded in our Green and Sustainable Development Partnership you're aware of there, which is a channeling of financial means, but also technical support over a predictable time phase until 2030 in a full-fledged amount of 10 billion euros. So to have this in mind, this is very unique. We only have this with India. There are discussions with other countries if we can go a little bit also on that one, but it has really also budget regulation constraints to go this way. But it's a very helpful thing. I'm an old development guy. I look on Busan and Accra commitments and so on, the Paris Declaration. So for me, I love this kind of melody, but also I know with the German Parliament Commission, it would be probably difficult to discuss this as a standard pattern. But we go ahead on that. The question of shared responsibility in a global range, this is a part of the February visit and later on the G20. This is a totally different platform. It involves both countries, but not in this north-south understanding so easily, which is coming up again and again. No, because India would refuse to be put into the silo in regard of being less influential on a global range because it's coming from the south, because this is my logic where you cut it off. No, that's not true. India is heading forward to take up the responsibility in a global range and not being judged by Germany as a northern state in the way how they do it, right or not. These are partners on eyesight, and this is how I understand the dialogue I have. These are partners on eyesight. I crap all of this historical thing because this is not what India is heading for, and they are absolutely right. And as a development partner, I'm fully counting on that. So that leads to the question you had with this, I don't take it up, I'm not gonna answer on that one. Go ahead, go with this, how are you? Because the one thing you leave out in the whole discussion on when you put it on the global way is the importance of the community. When we go on the global range, we're always talking about top down. This is not just transition. This is not just transition. Just transition is bottom up, and we learn. This is how in Europe it worked. The bottom up. I don't want to hear more of this. I don't want to read more of these resolutions as long they are not written down and created by the communities who are affected by the reality they are facing. And this is something where systems have to jump in. And I'm sure for what we have the dialogue, and he mentioned on that one, how the European Union is configured, how the financial streams in Germany are configured. It's not the money which comes from the central. It's a bottom up, where the endorsement comes, the planning comes, the involvement comes, all of these different communities jumping in it, and parts of the financial means coming as well, because there is a buy-in. What you learn in development, wherever you come with money and not listen to the people, the money is not spent well. This is it. So this is the thing. And then it comes, with your SME, where you ask a German, this is really funny. Where comes innovation from? From Mercedes-Benz and Siemens? No. That's not where the innovation comes. They do a good work, actually employing a lot of people. But usually, if they would like to innovate, to be innovative, they buy a small or medium enterprise. to take up their knowledge and collaborate, because these guys are taking up the risk. The big ones usually don't take up the risk. And this is how the whole thing works, where, again, the magic happens. It's on the level which we often have not in sight when we're talking about the big politics and the big financial means. And this, you know, the Tatars and the Renews, they are very important, no doubt about it. But with all out of these little bricks in between in this pattern, it will not work out. And this is exactly how we understand the biggest part of the development in Germany always happened out of small and medium enterprises. And you would not wonder if I tell you now, Siemens started as a small enterprise. It became big because it was successful.
Thank you. Would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I suppose on the just, what does just mean in a north-south context? I mean, I think there's the historical context, but then there's the reality now, as you were saying, and it's the macro level. Like, how can we make the transitions faster throughout the world? And what are the common and differentiated responsibilities? There's that sort of side of thing on helping support that. But then there's also, like, at the micro level, like when you're designing a new transport system, how can you make that just? How can you make that help the people that don't have access to what they need now? And that is part of that as well. So, and then on the sort of the gas and expanding gas supply, I mean, gas can have a long-term future in a low-carbon economy through things like CCS, and we've just launched a big new investment in CCS in the UK. So gas has a role there long-term, and as you were saying, like it's helpful for in the UK for us to have our domestic supply at the moment, and for heat, as I was mentioning, given the geopolitics at the moment. So that's the sort of, for the medium term, there's a role there.
Thank you. Would you like to respond?
No, I just wanted to ask because, of course, I knew we'll end up talking about the COP29 and all the other COPs in Baku, Azerbaijan, and next years. So this COP is supposed to be the finance COP. Yeah? We are going to discuss again, once again, the financial flows. So I would like very much support what Uwe was saying, but at the same time. So yeah, it's a north-south divide. Yeah, it will pass into the history very, very soon. So we would like, as the European Union, we don't want to refuse our responsibility. Of course, there is a responsibility. We take the lead. We will continue to take the lead. But on the other hand, the realities and the situation is changing. So countries move from developing to developed. They increase the income. They increase the level of social economic development, and we cannot stay in the world which was there 10, 20 years ago. And I would also like to remind, because of course we always hear in India, we always hear this request for financing, for more and more and more financing. Of course, we know, we all admit that the public sources of finance are not enough. So we need to somehow find the new mechanisms and the new instruments to involve the public finance. But at the same time, the European Union continues to be the world's biggest donor of the public finance, public climate finance. In 2022, we have, together with the member states, of course, we have contributed 28.5 billion euros to the climate finance. This money has mobilized additional 12 billion of private finance. Out of this, more than 50% goes into the adaptation. So it's not only cutting emissions, it's also adapting to the consequences of the climate change. And in fact, this global pledge of 100 billion every year, it has been reached. It has been overpassed in 2022 for the first time. It will continue to be applicable until 25, and then we will continue negotiating even more, because it has been agreed that in this new collective quantified goal on climate finance, we will start from the level of 100 and it will go up. So yeah, so we continue financing, but of course it's also responsibility for the countries that receive this. Please.
Maybe, Bartosz, because adding up on what you said, to get one thing clear, is because to reduce the whole discussion on the financial means and the responsibility of the North. To be honestly, you know, out of the machinery room, we have a big envelope of financial potential support, and it's not always well received. You see that it's becoming a more and more critical environment to get into with concessional lending, honestly spoken, because worldwide there is obviously, I would say a little bit, there's enough money in the run, and somehow the biggest challenge is to steer it in the right directions, but actually always to shrink it on the way that we're not providing the necessary financial means. If you have to negotiate financial contracts like I have, you sometimes, you know, getting like wondering, oh, do you want the money or not? Because if you put it then contentional what you have to do because it's related to a certain development outcome, yeah, then some people say, I don't know that. So it's not so easy, honestly spoken.
Thank you.
And to name it, you know, to name it honestly, you were so kindly. I straight around there. Nobody said China. I just say China, and the rest I leave to you to think about it in this North-South discussion. China.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think we'll have to end it. We've already overshot our time. Thank you to each one of you for taking your time out, joining us. And special thanks to Mr. Buchanan, who joined us at the midnight. You can go back to your bed now. Thank you so much for joining. And thanks all of you for attending this session. Thanks.